Apple has just released a new MacBook Air. It's very good. Yeah, there's possibly a bit more to say about that. Hello, I'm William Gallagher, and this is 58 Keys, which, as ever, as always, is for writers like you and me who use and who write on Macs and iPhones and iPads. I was going to say do subscribe to 58 Keys, or maybe support the channel on Patreon, because as well as new MacBooks like today, there are writing apps to talk about like Pages, Scrivener, Word. Yeah, not quite so much about Word, to be fair. And also services for us like iCloud, Setapp, all sorts of things. There's always so much for us to talk about and put off writing. Today, though, is specifically two things to talk about because Apple has released two versions of the new M3 MacBook Air, a 13-inch model and a 15-inch one. Actually, tell you what, let's go from the top. The new 13-inch M3 MacBook Air starts at $1,099 or £1,099, and the 15-inch version starts at $1,299 or £1,299. They're both very good. They're both very fast. If you do not have a MacBook at all and you want one, then this is almost certainly the one for you. So close to certain. There are reasons to get others. There are reasons, for example, to shop the Apple Refurb store for cheaper, older versions. Link in the description if you don't already know the Refurb store. And Apple is continuing to sell one of the previous models, the M2 MacBook Airs, and that's from $999 or pounds. It's only selling the 13-inch version of that M2 model, though. And unless your budget is tight, it's not worth it. The $100 more for the M3, well, it's better now because of the faster performance you'll get, and it's kind of better later because machines have a lifespan. Buy the newest model you can, and it will last you the longest number of years possible. And I did say that the new one is very good. Not to be flippant about it, but that could be all that has to be said about it. Because the new machine is very fast, it's very light. The screen, if it's the same as the other MacBook Pros, it looks gorgeous. And Apple now claims that this one will last for 18 hours on a single battery charge. I just do not doubt for a moment that you will be very happy with an M3 MacBook Air, except if you currently have any Apple Silicon MacBooks, so MacBook Air, MacBook Pro from about 2020 onwards, then probably don't bother with this one. It is faster. It is better. I mean, you know how much time we spend in front of our Macs writing away. You will see the difference in this latest version of Apple Silicon. But I think in this case, going from any other Apple Silicon to this M3 one, for what we do most of the time, you could see the difference, but you'd probably have to look for it. I mean, there are other things than writing that these machines can do for us that can do faster, where the difference is going to be much more obvious between the M3 and the older ones. But writing and most of the sort of work we do, no. Any Apple Silicon will do. As long as it has Apple Silicon in it, then it is a really, really good buy. I mean, 4 years into having Apple Silicon in my Macs, I'm actually still conscious of how fast these things are. I want to skip to the bottom of my 100,000 word novel. I'm there. I want to open a spreadsheet to check a fact for a client. Well, there it is. I want to render out some video from Final Cut Pro, and yeah, all right, that one's not there, but it walloped them. But it's very, very fast, and very much faster than it used to be. It's the Apple Silicon part. That has been the transformative part of the Mac over the last few years. I kind of want to say it's day and night, but we're writers, we resist cliches. It's morning and evening. How's that? Listen to it. Apple keeps plugging lots of figures, throwing figures at us. Whenever it releases any new device, it's 5% faster than this one. It's 10%. Yeah, loads and loads of figures. Some of them significant, I think, and some of them arguably a little bit cherry-picked, questionable. And actually, pretty much all of them, you can hear about more and in better detail from more informed people than me everywhere else. I don't know them very well, and I don't care. Apart from the price, the specifications of a new machine It's like the numbers don't help me. I'm interested in what I can do with it, what it can do for me. But in this case, there is one figure. Apple says that this new machine is 13 times faster than the last Intel-based MacBook Air from a few years ago. And that figure, yeah, that one I believe. With that kind of speed difference, you know it affects everything, doesn't it? You'd think actually with any modern computer that it's your and my typing speeds that slow it down more than anything else could. But no. Even just with typing, if you go from Intel to Apple Silicon, any of them, you will feel the difference. Really pushing Apple Silicon here, but I so mean it. Speaking of feeling the difference, so has this. There is another way in which you'll do that. You'll experience the difference, specifically with the new M3 MacBook Air. It's light. I mean, it feels ludicrously light. You look at the specs, it's not that different to others, but it still feels nice. It comes in colours, midnight, starlight, space grey, boring old silver. Let us never rule out the difference of colours that you can get in these things. I mean, I have a MacBook Pro, for example, and yeah, that doesn't come in starlight or blue or anything. Yeah, I think that's such a shame. But as I say, I have a MacBook Pro, and actually pretty much since these machines were invented, it's always been kind of the same. MacBook Pro versus MacBook Air. The MacBook Air is cheaper. The MacBook Pro is more powerful. It's faster. The MacBook Air, the new one on the M3 though, it doesn't remove, but it kind of makes that difference significantly smaller, or it could in a lot of cases. A big thing with the old MacBook Air was that it had this gorgeous wedge-shaped design. It cantered down towards the bottom of it. It was great to type on. But that shape made it harder to ventilate than a more boring, boxy kind of shape. And so when you stressed out the machine, when you're doing a lot with it, its processor would get hot, and because it couldn't be cooled sufficiently, the Mac would go, yeah, let's just slow things down a bit here, you know. So you could actually do a lot on the Apple Silicon MacBook Air, the M2 and stuff. You could do a lot on it that you could do on the MacBook Pro, but typically you couldn't do it for very long before it would just suddenly slow down. The Mac would go, yeah, let's just take our time here. No need to hurry. Whereas the MacBook Pro just keeps going and going and going. I was going to say cool, but that's the whole point. It is cool. Now that the MacBook Air has lost that wedge, which is a shame, the design, it's much more like a regular MacBook Pro, so the ventilation is much more similar. There are other differences between the models, but ultimately a new MacBook Air can do more than the older ones and do it for longer. So MacBook Pro wins always really on performance and speed and everything except the price. It really loses on price. But as I say, for us as writers, most of what we do, the MacBook Air, I mean, it's not just like it's good enough. It's fantastic. Can we have fantastic enough as a phrase? Let's do it. Let's make that a phrase. Fantastic enough for writers. I like that more and more. And okay, we are writers, but we also tend to do other things as well. We all do all sorts of other things besides writing. And sometimes it's that other thing that makes the difference between which MacBook is right for you overall and which just isn't up to all of the jobs you need to do. This is tough, but I mean, there is an easy, obvious example, and it's video editing. I mean, I do that. Video editing makes a big difference. If you edit a lot of video, then you're better off going for a MacBook Pro, or maybe even a desktop Mac. MacBook Air will be slower, not by as much as it used to be, not by as much these days, but it will definitely be slower. The trouble is, what's enough? How do you know what's enough about this? I edit a 10 to 20 minute video once or twice a week, for instance, and I don't think that's very much at all, but I can't quantify what's enough. Unless, well, there is this. This might do it for you. Take a look at this, please. When you've done a video, if you don't happen to know this and live in it every day, well, the last thing is that your video editor, your software, whatever it is, it renders it out, prepares the the video file. This is Final Cut Pro doing its job on a 58 keys video. Now, if you are already very familiar with that box and that thermometer, and actually if you are really familiar with how long it takes, then I think we can say you are editing enough video that anything that speeds it up will be good, and you should probably go for a MacBook Pro. I'm not like that. I mean, I'm familiar with the box. I know very well the thermometer going by, but with my work and when I do it and the volume of it, I don't care. Oh, actually, I don't even know how long it takes for this thing to render out. I mean, no, I couldn't even guess. Actually, I just run it and then I go off to get a mug of tea. So I wouldn't benefit from going for a faster machine. Yeah, except I did go for a faster machine, didn't I? A couple of years ago now. I went for a 14-inch MacBook Pro, and significantly, maybe, I was very pleased about it then, and I continue to be pleased with it now, when I'm doing quite a bit more than I was. But even so, hand on heart, I probably don't truly need it. The new MacBook Air would be good enough for me, particularly now. This new one has the M3 processor, and I'm on M1 in the MacBook Pro. Buying the MacBook Air, right, it depends on what you do, depends on what you like. It also depends a little bit on where you do all of these things that you like. Because the MacBook Pro that I have, for all that it's light, doesn't feel light. It doesn't feel anywhere near as light as the just gossamer MacBook Air. When I've used MacBook Airs in the past, it's just been laughable, actually, how light and slim they are. I mean, in a good way, delightedly laughable, but still laughable. I think the MacBook Pro is great, but it is noticeably, demonstrably heavy. It's like it's concentrated weight. You really feel it. Overall then, well, unless you just fancy a MacBook Pro and you have the cash, in which case, yeah, knock yourself out. The things to think of are these. If you don't have an Apple Silicon Mac, get this new one, the M3 MacBook Air. If you have an Apple Silicon Mac of any age or description and it's doing what you need, you're happy with it, then don't buy the new MacBook Air. Only, let's say you are going to buy. Well, then there is this issue of the screen size to consider. Actually, there is a bit more, isn't there? There's also the storage space to buy, the RAM, the memory, and that pushes up the price. But the answer to both of those is to buy as much as you possibly can when you're ordering. You can't change it later, buy it now. If you have to go one or the other, probably the storage space is going to make the most difference to you in the long run. But back to the screens, because this is the choice that I think will affect how useful the MacBook Air is to you. It's half personal preference, half what you can afford. But for instance, I actually held out for a long time before buying this MacBook Pro of mine. I'd got funding to buy a 13-inch MacBook Pro for a particular project. There's all sorts of deadlines and things. But at the time, it looked so likely, correctly as it turned out, that there would be a 14-inch one soon, then that I held on to that funding as long as I could. I think it may even have come down to the final week when I had to, report back to the funders that I had spent the money allocated and I'd got this. But 14-inch model came out just in time and I bought that. Admittedly, I had to add almost exactly the same amount again out of my own pocket to get it. But I waited for the 14 because 14 is better than 13 and surprisingly, substantially so. I knew that just from what I've seen of working on existing 13-inch MacBooks. I mean, I used to just find the 13 size too cramped. So I think now, if I were buying the 15, would be the one to go for. The only small qualification of that is that I have actually used a 16-inch MacBook Pro. And it's, 1 inch either side, but it felt like I was sitting behind a sail. Whether you like 13 or 15-inch screens on the MacBook Air, though, they are screens that are actually on the device, aren't they? They're built into it. And you don't have to use that built-in screen at all. You can just plug in an external monitor, have something like this, a wide monitor with a big display, have a Mac with a big display. Not really as portable, but you can do it. And one significant difference between this new M3 MacBook Pro and the previous M2 model is to do with plugging in external monitors like that. The older device, it would only let you plug in one monitor, where the new M3 edition will let you run two external monitors at the same time. 2 monitors, no waiting. So there's an argument that 13 inches are fractionally better than the 15 because it's slightly smaller, therefore slightly more convenient and light. It's slightly more easy to carry around, and yet you can still just plug it into 2 whacking great big monitors on your desk whenever you need to. On balance, I think the 15-inch is still the better value because I think it's more usable on its own without those external monitors. And at least sometimes, right, you are going to be doing that. You're not going to be gluing the MacBook Air to your desk and plugged into 2 monitors. I mean, if you were, financially and performance things, you would be better off buying a desktop Mac, a Mac Mini or a Mac Studio. No portability, but more power and comparatively cheaper, pound for pound. Last thing, there is also this. We both know writers do all sorts of things, like we can be doing video editing, audio editing, really heavy spreadsheet lifting kinds of things. But it's still true that basically we are writers. Basically, of course we're writers. And what we do is we type. So can we justify spending all this money when a pencil would do? Yeah, why not? I mean, just because we're writers doesn't mean we can't have nice things. And just because we mostly write on it doesn't mean we won't appreciate and get the benefit of a really, really fast and nice machine. Unless you're coming from a faster MacBook Pro, yeah, fine lines. Almost certainly the M3 MacBook Air is the best thing. I can't see a circumstance actually where you would be unhappy with the MacBook Air unless you'd gone down from a 16-inch MacBook Pro. I cannot see a circumstance where you wouldn't be delighted with it. I mean, there are computers out there that are no, but this one, delightful. You've got to get past the pain point of paying for the cash, but after that bit, bliss. That's it for this edition of 58 Keys. Thank you very much for watching. Now take care of yourself, eh? Write more. With a pencil or a MacBook Air, whatever it takes, just write more. And I'll see you soon.